Everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to do a deep dive into the California wildfires that are happening right now in January 2025.
Ah.
We've got a press release here from the American Red Cross.
Oh, okay.
It's pretty intense. Hundreds of Red Cross workers are already on the ground
Hmm.
helping people who've been displaced from their homes. And it sounds like with the weather conditions,
Yeah.
it's still an ongoing threat.
Yeah, and what's really striking about this is it seems to be impacting folks from all walks of life.
Yeah.
The press release talks about homes of all kinds and sizes being destroyed.
Right.
And that makes me think that this isn't just, those big estates that
Yeah.
we sometimes see threatened by wildfires. It seems like it's really impacting entire communities.
Yeah, no, you're right. And it makes you think about how vulnerable we all are
Right.
to these increasingly powerful natural disasters.
Yeah.
And when you read the way that the Red Cross is describing the conditions that are feeding these fires,
Hmm.
it's
Yeah.
it's no surprise that they're spreading so fast. And they call it a perfect storm. And it really does seem like that perfect combination
Oh,
for
yeah.
disaster.
Yeah, it is a frightening recipe. You have all this dry vegetation, what they call dry fuels,
Right.
just waiting for a spark. And then you add in these incredibly strong winds reaching hurricane force,
Wow.
which are whipping the flames around and pushing them further.
Yeah.
And as if that wasn't enough, the air is so dry, the humidity is so low that everything is just primed to ignite.
It's like throwing gasoline on an already raging fire.
Yeah.
It's no wonder we're seeing these fires just explode in size, burning through tens of thousands of acres in a matter of days.
Yeah.
It really puts into perspective the scale
Right.
of what firefighters and first responders are up against.
And it's not just about fighting the flames themselves,
Right.
The Red Cross is already mobilizing hundreds more disaster workers and sending truckloads of supplies,
Oh, wow.
which tells us that they're expecting a long and difficult recovery period.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in that immediate danger.
Right.
But the aftermath of these fires is going to be just as challenging.
Mm.
So what kind of support is the Red Cross providing
Well,
in those initial stages after the
Yeah.
fires die down?
they're focusing on the essentials, providing safe shelter, food, and water to those who've been displaced.
Okay.
But beyond that, they're also providing emotional support,
Hmm.
which is absolutely crucial when people have just experienced such a traumatic event.
Right.
Losing your home, your community, everything,
Yeah.
that's a devastating blow.
Yeah, I can't even imagine the emotional toll that takes
Right.
on people. I'm guessing that emotional support is just as important as that physical aid.
Absolutely.
Do you know if they have like specialized training
I'm sure they do.
to deal with that kind of trauma?
The Red Cross has such a long history of responding to disasters of all kinds,
Yeah.
and they've developed a really deep understanding of the needs of people in crisis. And they also have this vast network of volunteers who are trained to provide comfort and support in those really difficult moments.
It's amazing to think about the level of coordination and expertise
Yeah.
that goes into a response like this. It's not just about putting out the fires.
Right.
It's about rebuilding lives and communities.
Exactly. And that's where the Red Cross's expertise in logistics and community outreach really shines.
Yeah.
They're able to mobilize resources so quickly and efficiently,
Yeah.
and they have such a deep understanding of the specific needs of the communities that they serve.
That's so crucial in a situation like this.
Yeah.
I'm also reading here that they're emphasizing the importance of personal preparedness.
Mm.
They're urging people to be vigilant, stay informed about local conditions,
Yeah,
and have an evacuation plan in place.
absolutely. They're really stressing that this is a dynamic situation
Right.
and things can change rapidly, so they want people to be prepared to move quickly if necessary
Oh, yeah.
and know what steps to take to stay safe.
It makes sense. They're focusing on that immediate relief, but also trying to empower people to be more self-sufficient in these dangerous situations.
Mhm.
That brings up a question, though. How do they actually get this information out to
Mhm.
people who might be in danger?
They're using all the tools at their disposal. Obviously, traditional media like radio and TV broadcasts are still really important.
Yeah.
But they're also leveraging social media,
Right.
mobile apps,
Yeah.
and even text messaging to get alerts and updates out to the public.
So they're really trying to meet people where they are using
Right.
every channel possible.
Right.
I see they specifically mentioned the Red Cross Emergency app.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the key features of that?
It's a really comprehensive tool.
Okay.
You can use it to get real-time alerts about weather conditions,
Uh-huh.
find open shelters in your area,
Wow.
access first aid information,
Right.
and even connect with family and friends to let them know you're safe.
It's like a one-stop shop for disaster preparedness and response.
Absolutely. And it's a real testament to how the Red Cross is constantly innovating and finding new ways to leverage technology to better serve people in need.
So they're on the cutting edge when it comes to utilizing these digital tools.
They have to be.
Yeah.
In today's world where information spreads so quickly,
Right.
it's essential to have a robust digital presence and to be able to communicate effectively across multiple platforms.
So they're out there on the front lines providing aid and support, but they're also working behind the scenes to make sure people have access to the information
Right.
and the resources they need to stay safe. It's a multifaceted approach,
Yeah.
which I'm sure is pretty challenging to coordinate.
It definitely requires a high level of coordination and expertise, but from what we're seeing here, the Red Cross seems to be handling it very effectively.
So they're doing incredible work on the ground, but I'm sure they need a lot of support to keep those efforts going.
Oh, yeah.
What can people do if they want to help?
Well, the most direct way is to make a financial donation. You can do that online at redcross.org, call 1-800-RED-CROSS, or even text Red Cross to 90999 to make a quick $10 donation.
That's great to know. I'm sure every little bit helps.
Yeah.
And for those who want to specifically support the California wildfire relief efforts,
Right.
they can write California Wildfires 2025 in the memo line of a check write.
That's right. And even if you can't donate financially, there are still ways to help. You can volunteer your time at a local Red Cross chapter or donate blood, which is always in high demand during emergencies.
Those are all great suggestions. It's inspiring to see how people come together in times of crisis to support one another.
It really is, and it speaks to the resilience of the human spirit and our capacity for compassion in the face of adversity.
Absolutely. Speaking of resilience, the Red Cross press release also mentions that while all this is happening in California, they're also gearing up for another disaster.
Oh, wow.
A massive winter storm hitting the South.
That's right. It seems like they're facing a double whammy right now.
Yeah.
With these two major disasters unfolding simultaneously.
That's got to be a logistical nightmare. How do they manage to respond to multiple disasters at once, especially when they're so geographically diverse?
That's where their national network and their strong partnerships really come into play.
Okay.
You know, they have chapters all across the country, each with its own team of trained volunteers and resources.
Yeah, it's amazing how they're able to mobilize so quickly and efficiently, even when they're dealing with multiple emergencies at once. It's a testament to their planning and preparedness.
Absolutely. You know, they have to be ready for anything at any time.
Yeah.
It's a demanding job, but they're clearly up to the challenge.
It's incredible to think about the scope of their work and the impact they have on people's lives.
Yeah.
But beyond the immediate response, I'm curious to explore the long-term consequences of these disasters and how communities can adapt to these evolving challenges.
That's a crucial question. You know, we need to move beyond reactive responses and start thinking proactively about mitigation, resilience, and adaptation.
Definitely. So we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
From the immediate crisis to that long-term recovery.
Right.
I think it's time to dig deeper into those long-term consequences you mentioned and explore what steps we can take to build a more resilient future.
I agree. That's where things get really interesting.
All right, so let's take a quick break and then come back to unpack those big picture issues. So we talked about the immediate response to these wildfires, but you mentioned there's a whole other layer to this, the long-term consequences.
Right.
Where do we even begin to unpack that?
It's a complex issue with so many facets. We can start by looking at the environmental impact. These fires are releasing huge amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which contributes to climate change, and the loss of trees and vegetation leads to soil erosion, impacting water quality and wildlife habitats.
Right.
It's a cascading effect.
And those environmental impacts then ripple out and affect people's lives in countless ways. I mean, we're already seeing the health impacts of wildfire smoke, particularly for vulnerable populations like children and the elderly.
Absolutely. And then there's the economic fallout. Businesses are disrupted, tourism suffers, and the cost of rebuilding infrastructure is astronomical.
Oh, yeah.
The 2025 fires are already being called some of the most expensive in
Wow.
California's history.
A staggering price tag. It makes you wonder, how can communities possibly recover
Right.
from such a devastating blow?
It's a long and difficult process, that's for sure. But there are things we can do to build more resilient communities.
Okay.
For one, we need to rethink how we manage our forests. Controlled burns and thinning can help reduce the amount of dry fuel
Right.
that's so susceptible to wildfires.
That makes sense. We also need to make sure that building codes are updated to reflect the increasing risk of wildfires. Things like fire-resistant materials and defensible space around homes can make a huge difference.
Absolutely crucial steps.
Yeah,
And we can't forget about community preparedness.
right.
People need to be educated about the risks, have evacuation plans in place,
Right.
and know how to protect themselves and their property.
It sounds like a multi-pronged approach is needed involving everything from forest management to individual preparedness. It's not just about reacting to disasters.
Right.
It's about proactively creating a safer environment.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting. We can't just keep doing things the way we've always done them.
Right.
We need to be innovative and find new solutions to these complex challenges.
So what are some of those innovative solutions? Are there any new technologies or approaches being used in wildfire prevention and response
Yeah.
that give you hope?
There are actually some really exciting developments in this area. For example, researchers are using artificial intelligence to better predict wildfire behavior,
Wow.
which can help firefighters target their efforts more effectively.
Using AI to fight wildfires.
Yeah,
It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
I know, right?
Are there any other tech advancements that are particularly promising?
There's also a lot of research being done on drones for wildfire response.
Oh, cool.
They can be used to map fire perimeters, identify hotspots,
Wow.
and even drop fire retardant in hard-to-reach areas.
That's amazing. It seems like technology is playing an increasingly important role in disaster response.
Right,
But it's not just about fancy gadgets.
right.
It's also about community engagement
Oh, absolutely.
and collaboration.
Building a resilient community requires everyone to be involved. Local organizations, businesses, and individuals all have a role to play.
Right.
We need to work together to identify vulnerabilities, develop solutions, and create a culture of preparedness.
It's a collective effort, for sure. And it's not just about preparing for the next disaster.
Right?
It's also about addressing the underlying factors that are contributing to these increasingly frequent and severe wildfires.
That's a critical point.
Yeah.
Climate change is a major driver of these extreme weather events, and we need to address it head on if we want to create a truly sustainable future.
So it seems like the conversation about wildfire resilience is intricately linked to the broader conversation about climate change.
Absolutely. It's all interconnected. We can't solve one without addressing the other. But the good news is that there are things we can do both individually and collectively to make a difference.
That's encouraging to hear. So we've talked about the challenges, but what are some of the things that give you hope for the future? What are some positive trends or innovations that you're seeing?
Well, one thing that's really inspiring is the growing awareness and concern about climate change, especially among young people. They're demanding action.
Right.
And that's driving change at all levels of society.
That's definitely a positive sign. And I've also noticed that more and more communities are taking a proactive approach to wildfire resilience. They're implementing those forest management practices we talked about, updating building codes,
Right.
and educating residents about preparedness.
Yeah, we're seeing a shift from a reactive to a proactive mindset.
Yeah.
And that's a huge step in the right direction.
Right.
There's still a long way to go, but there's a growing recognition that we need to work together
Yeah.
to build a more resilient future.
It's a reminder that we're not powerless in the face of these challenges. We have the knowledge, the tools, and the collective will to make a difference.
Yeah.
But it requires a shift in perspective from a focus on individual survival to a focus on community resilience.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's about recognizing that we're all in this together and that our individual actions have a ripple effect on the world around us.
It's a powerful message, and one that I think resonates deeply with our listeners. As we wrap up this part of the deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought.
Okay.
What's one thing you would encourage our listeners to do today to contribute to a more resilient future?
That's a great question. I think the most important thing is to stay informed and engaged.
Yeah.
Learn about the risks in your community, educate yourself about climate change, and support organizations that are working to build a more sustainable world.
That's great advice. Knowledge is power, and by staying informed and engaged, we can all play a role in creating a safer, more resilient future for ourselves and for generations to come.
It's incredible to think about all the people out there on the front lines, as
Yeah.
we're talking about these wildfires and the work that the Red Cross is doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's hard not to think about those volunteers
Right.
putting themselves in harm's way to help others.
It's truly remarkable. These are everyday people
Right.
who step up in extraordinary ways, just driven by this shared sense of humanity and a desire to make a difference. They really are the unsung heroes of this story.
Yeah.
And it's their efforts,
Yeah.
combined with the generosity of so many donors,
Right.
that make it possible for the Red Cross to provide that critical lifeline to those in need.
It really highlights that interconnectedness we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
While California is grappling with these wildfires, the South is bracing for a winter storm.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Disasters don't discriminate,
Yeah.
and the need for preparedness and support extends far beyond any single event.
It's a constant cycle. It makes you realize that having a strong disaster response system in place is absolutely essential, one that can adapt, that is
Yeah.
well-funded, and can meet the needs of diverse communities.
And that system relies on all of us.
Yeah.
Individual preparedness, community engagement, informed policy decisions.
Right.
We all have a role to play in building a more resilient future.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's one key takeaway you hope our listeners are walking away with today?
I think the most important thing is to remember that we're not powerless in the face of these challenges. We have the knowledge, we have the tools,
Right.
and we have the collective will to make a difference.
I love that. What would you say is the first step someone should take if they want to become more involved
Oh, that's a great
in
question.
building that resilient future?
I would say start by taking a look at your own community.
Okay.
What are the specific risks that you face?
Yeah.
What resources are available? Are there local organizations working on disaster preparedness or climate change mitigation?
Those are all great starting points. It can feel overwhelming to think about these big global issues, but focusing on what we can do locally can make a real difference.
Absolutely. And remember, every action, no matter how small it might seem, contributes to a stronger, more resilient community. It could be as simple as putting together an emergency kit, learning CPR, or volunteering with a local organization.
Those are fantastic suggestions. And as we sign off, I want to encourage our listeners to keep learning, stay curious, and stay engaged. Because ultimately, the key to building a more resilient future lies in our collective knowledge and action.
Well said. It's been great chatting with you.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, stay safe and stay informed.